We continue now at the top of Daf Tesvav and Aleph Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 15a. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah said that when it comes to selling small animals to Ovdei Kochavim, to idol worshippers, so it all depends on the minhag hamakom, the custom of that particular place. If it's a place where the custom is to forbid that, so then it's forbidden to sell the small animals to the Ovdei Kochavim. And if it is a place where it's the custom is that it's permitted, so then we say that it is permitted. And the Gemara asked on the previous Amud, is it really all dependent on the minhag hamakom, but isn't there a prohibition across the board? Because we find in a Mishnah coming up that you're not allowed to leave your animals by the inns of the Ovdei Kochavim because there's a concern of bestiality. And so Rav on the previous Amud, he says that really even the Mishnah later on, it all depends on the minhag hamakom. It means to say, if it's a place where the custom is to be concerned for the sodomy, to be concerned for the bestiality, so then there's a concern. Otherwise, there is no concern. And the Gemara continues and gives a different approach. Rabbi Lazar Omer, and Rabbi Lazar says, Av b'makom she'asru liyached, even in a place where it is forbidden for the non-Jew to be in seclusion, you can't leave your animal by the non-Jews inn because there's a concern for bestiality. But muter limchor, but it still would be permitted to sell the animal to the Oved Kochavim, to the idol worshiper, meaning to say you can have a place where the minhag hamakom is to allow the sale, and therefore the sale could go forward. But in terms of yichud, so that would be a problem. Now, why would we make a distinction? Shouldn't it always be a concern of bestiality? And so the Gemara says to that, my time, and what's the reason? Oved Kochavim chasal behemto shelo teyaker. If you're selling the animal to the Oved Kochavim, to the idol worshiper, so now it's his animal, and the Oved Kochavim is chasal behemto. He cares about his animal. He doesn't want his animal to become sterile. The animals would become sterile if, again, the non-Jew, the idol worshiper, would engage in bestiality with the animal. And so therefore, when it comes to the sale, we have more reason to permit. And the Gemara continues and says, V'af Rav Hadar Bey, and even Rav retracted and ended up agreeing with this idea of Rabbi Lazar. The Amar Rav Tachlifa, Amar Rav Shila bar Avimi Mishmei de Rav, because Rav Tachlifa said that Rav Shila bar Avimi said in the name of Rav, Oved Kochavim Chasal Behemto Shelo Te'arker. An idol worshiper does care about his animal. He does not want that it should become sterile. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Uvechol makom, in all places, ein mochrin behema gasa v'chuli." You can't sell large animals to the Ovdei Kochavim. And the Gemara says, "My time." And what's the reason for this? Nihida l'revia lo chashin. Now, granted, we're going to say that in terms of bestiality, we say that might not be a concern because, again, as we said, the Ovdei Kochavim is chasal behemto shelo te'akir. He doesn't want the animal to become sterile. But the Gemara says, "Miyavid bei malacha chashinan." But we are concerned that he's going to do malacha on Shabbos with the animal. That's why you can't sell this large animal to the Oved Kochavim. But the Gemara says, V'ni avid. But the Gemara says, but let him do the work. Who cares? Kevin de Zavna Kanya. If he already bought the animal, so he owns the animal, and therefore doesn't belong to the Jewish person. And so therefore, non-Jew is not commanded over Shabbos. So what's the issue over here? You should be able to sell the large animal to the non-Jew. The Gemara says, no, Gezer, it's because there's a decree, Mishum She'elo, Mishum Schiris, because maybe you're going to lend the animal to the non-Jew, or maybe you're going to rent out the animal to the non-Jew. And so in those situations, the animal really still belongs to the Jew, and there is a mitzvah that the animals even of a Jewish person should rest on Shabbos, and so therefore we have that concern, and that's why you shouldn't sell to the non-Jew the large animals, because you might come to end up lending, to end up renting. The Gemara says, 1 second, She'ela Kanya, Viagra Kanya. That's not a good answer, because even if you lend it, isn't he really the owner for that time that he's borrowing it? Even when you rent it to the non-Jew, isn't he the owner for that period of time? The Gemara later is going to question this and say maybe not. Maybe if he's borrowing it or renting it, he doesn't really become the owner at that time. But right now the Gemara says no, really She'ela Kanya, Viagra Kanya, and therefore the Gemara offers another answer. Ela Amar Rami Bered Rav Yeva, rather Rami, the son of Rav Yeva, he says it's a Gezerah Mishum Nisione. It's a Gezer, it's a decree because you might test out the animal, as the Gemara now explains what that means. Sometimes he might sell the animal to him near the time of sunset on Friday. It's almost Shabbos. And then he says to him, let's test the animal, make sure that it can carry a load. And then the animal will hear the voice of its owner. It's going to walk carrying a load, and it's going to walk based on the voice, which is guiding it, the voice of the owner of the Jew. And also, furthermore, the Gemara says the Jew wants the animal to walk properly in this manner, to carry the load, to show that it's a good animal. And if this should happen on Shabbos, that's called mechamer achar behemto on Shabbos. That's called leading the animal in this fashion on Shabbos to do this malacha. V'hamechamer achar behemto b'Shabbos chayev chatas. One who is mechamer achar behemto on Shabbos is chayev chatas. That's an isur d'oraisa, and so that's the concern. That's why we don't want you to sell the animal to the non-Jew. But the Gemara continues and asks, Maskif lo Rav Shisha b'reider Ravidi, Rav Shisha the son of Ravidi, he asks the following question, Uschiros mikanya, but schiros, let's say you have a situation of a rental, is that really a kinyan? Is that really an acquisition? Again, the Gemara suggested above that when the non-Jew borrows the animal or rents the animal, so he becomes the owner of the animal for that period of time. Is that really true? But we learned in a Mishnah that's coming up, it says, Af b'mokom sha'amru lahaskir, even in places where they said you are allowed to rent out property to the idol worshiper. Lo lebeis dira amru, they didn't say that you can rent out property that the idol worshiper should live there. Because then he's going to bring into the property Avoda Zara, he'll bring idols into the property, and so therefore that would not be allowed. And the point over here is as follows. Now if it should enter your mind, sechirus kanya, that rental is considered to be a real kinyan and the owner is the non-Jew. So this person, when he's going into the house and he's bringing in the Avoda Zara, he's bringing it into his own house. So what would even be the concern? Rent out the house, let it be lebeis dira, let it be the place where the non-Jew will live, but he's the owner, so it's not an issue. The Gemara says, well, that's not necessarily true, even if he is considered the owner through rental, but shani avodas kochavim dechamir, it's different by Avoda Zara. That's something that we're just generally more strict with. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, v'lo savi to'eval beisach, it says you can't bring the abominations into your house. And the Gemara continues, Ma'askif lo Rav Yitzchak b'reider of Mesharshia. Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Mesharshia, asks the following question, Uschiros mikanya, but the schiros, is it really a kinyan? Again, going on this question of whether rental is considered to be a kinyan or not. V'atanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, this is regarding Truma. It says, Yisrael shesachar para mikohen. Let's say Yisrael, let's say he rents a cow from a kohen. So Yachilena karshine Truma, he's allowed to feed it the Truma food. He can feed it the karshinim of Truma, and the idea is because he's not really the owner. It really is owned by the Kohen. It's the animal of the Kohen. So it can be fed Truma. The Kohen, Shesachar Param Yisrael. Let's say the other way around. A Kohen rents a cow from Yisrael. Afal Pishem Izono Sell Olav, even though he's responsible to feed that animal. So maybe you would say it's kind of the Kohen's in terms of food. Lo Yachilana Karshine Truma. He's not allowed to feed it the Karshinim of Truma. He can't give it food that's Truma because, again, in that situation, he's just renting from the Yisrael. The Yisrael is the real owner. And so it seems clear, says the Gemara, if it should enter your mind that rental is considered to be a kinyan, why can't he give it truma? Paradidei, it's actually his cow. We're saying again, it would seem to be from this Mishnah that rental does not make you the owner. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather Shmami, no, we see from this that schiras lo kanya, that rental is not the same as ownership. And so therefore the Gemara says we can really go back to the other earlier suggested answers. V'hashta de amrit schiras lo kanya, now that we're saying that rental is not a kinyan, so why is it that you can't sell these large animals to the non-Jews? It's gezer misham sechiras, it's a decree because you might rent it to them, and again, they're going to work it on Shabbos. Ugezer misham she'ela, it's a decree because maybe you'll lend it to them, and they'll work it on Shabbos. Ugezer misham nisyon, and also we can also suggest the other answer, that it's a gezer, it's a decree because you're going to test the animal right before Shabbos, as we just said above. And the Gemara continues, Rav Ada Sharel is Zavune Chamra, Aida de Safsir. Rav Ada, he allowed that you could sell a donkey if it was through a third party, it was through somebody who sold, he was acting as an agent to sell it on behalf of the actual owner. That, he said, is going to be allowed. If you're going to use a Safsira, so then that would not be a problem. Rashi says, Aida de Safsir, again, like through a middleman, Al Yidei Sirsur Yisrael, V'hamocher Nam Yisrael. The idea over here is that the middleman is a Yisrael and the seller himself is also Yisrael, but he said since you're going through the Safsir, it's not a problem. And as the Gemara now explains, each of the concerns we just mentioned above is not a concern if you're going to be using this middleman. Because imishum nisyone, if the issue is you're going to test it, halo yada lekale daz lamachmase. But this middleman, the animal doesn't know the voice of the middleman, so it won't walk because of the middleman's voice, the Safsira's voice, and so therefore that's not going to be an issue, even if it would be sold right before Shabbos. V'imishum she'elu schiras, now if it's because he's going to maybe lend it out, rent it out. But Kavan Delo Didei, since the Safsir is not the owner of the animal, Lo Moshel Velo Moger, he's not allowed to be lending or renting it. His job is to sell the animal. V'yod, and further, Mishum Delo Nigli Beimuma, furthermore, he doesn't even want to rent or lend out the animal because he doesn't want any blemishes to be known about this animal. So he only wants to sell it, and therefore the concerns are not a concern when you're using somebody to sell it, when you're using like an agent, you're using a middleman to sell the animal. And the Gemara continues, Rav Huna, Zavin Ahipara Lovet Kochavim. Rav Huna, he sold a cow to an idol worshiper, exactly like we're saying you're not allowed to do. You're not supposed to be selling the large animals to Ovid Kochavim, yet Rav Huna did it anyway. And so the Gemara continues, Amarle Rav Chisda said to him, he said to Rav Huna, My time of Marhachi, why is the master doing this? Amarle said to him, Amor l'shchita zavna, because it could be that he's buying it for the purpose to slaughter the animal. He might not be using the animal, and so therefore all of these concerns are not concerns. We can be lenient and assume that maybe he's buying it for shchita purposes. Rashi explains, Amor l'shchita zavna v'talinan l'kula. We're allowed to say that that might be a possibility, and we can be lenient. Now, what about our Mishnah, which said you're not allowed to? Umas nisan. Now, our Mishnah is b'vehema tamei. It could be by a non-kosher animal. Afila b'stama. That would be even in a regular sale, even if nothing is stated, because by a non-kosher animal, it's not going to be l'shchita. Inami b'tahora, or let's say it could also be, our Mishnah could be by a kosher animal. Uvemefarish le'ovid kochavim delekiyumei kai. But the ovid kochavim is clear that he's not planning on slaughtering it, meaning as long as you have a possibility that it's l'shchita, so then it would be permitted. Our Mishnah is talking about cases where that's impossible. Either the ovid kochavim said that he's not planning on slaughtering it, or you're talking about a non-kosher animal. But again, otherwise, we're able to be lenient. That's how Rashi understands the Gemara, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tesvav Amid Beis.